Hi, this is Roman, and this is going to be part 2 of standards-based grading. So let's take a look at helpful procedures and policies for redos and retakes. So as appropriate, students should write explanations on what was different between their first and subsequent attempts, on what they learned about themselves as learners. Student trackers could be useful for retakes. Replacing the previous grade with the new one. Do not average them. So this is a key feature of standards-based grading. You reward the student for continuing to work throughout the year and growing in their understanding. If you see 75, 80s, and 88, students get to redo just as much as the 65 and 55 students. So do not stand in the way of a child seeking excellence, right? It's not just to get students to pass. If someone's growing at whatever level, encourage them to pursue it. If report cards are due and there's not time to reteach before reassessing, record the lower grade and then work with the student in the next marking period. And if they present new evidence of proficiency, submit the grade change form. Changing the grade on the transcript from the previous marking period. Always reserve the right to give alternate versions and ask for follow-up questions to see if they've really mastered the material. This is one very key feature. When you're retesting, never retest the same question, retest the same concept. And that's valuable as a teacher, because if you are testing the same concept and you see a regression, right, that's an excellent way for you to identify as a teacher that there might be an instructional gap. Right? If everyone got 100 on the first attempt and then did not do so well on the second attempt, I mean, something needs to be addressed. And having that type of gradebook pushes you to address it ASAP, because it's so visual to us. Redo or retake goals. Students should be allowed to redo assessments until they achieve acceptable mastery, and they should be given full credit for achieving so. This is a lot of more work for an educator. Having said that, it's more work on the content and more work on achieving the standards, rather than possibly making phone calls about students missing, again, something that I like to call fluff work. So maybe a 100-page packet that's assessing the same standard over and over and over again, instead of really diving deep. Here's one of my favorite quotes from Doug Reeves, The Chronicle of Higher Education. The class of 2013 grew up playing video games and received feedback that was immediate and specific and brutal. They won or else they died at the end of each game. For them, the purpose of feedback is not to calculate an average or score a final exam, but to inform them about how they can improve on their next attempt to rule the universe. So we want to push this idea of getting students to continuously reattempt and grow from their mistakes. These are 3 types of learning criteria related to standards by GUSKEY. Product criteria addresses what students know and are able to do at a particular point in time. They relate to student-specific achievements or level of proficiency as demonstrated by final exams, projects, or portfolios. Process relate to students' behaviors in reaching their current level of achievement and proficiency. They can include behavior, participation, punctuality, and turning in assignments, work habits. And then progress criteria considers how much students improve or gain from their learning experiences. And this really focuses on how students have advanced rather than where they are. A few more quotes about encouraging students to make mistakes. The fellow who never makes a mistake takes his orders from one who does. I have learned throughout my life as a composer, chiefly through my mistakes and pursuits of false assumptions, not my exposure to founts of wisdom and knowledge. And the last one is, an expert is a man who has made all the mistakes which can be made in a narrow field. When showing this to students, I could always share the story of Michael Jordan not making his high school team. And then continuing to pursue and continuing to try to grow. I know that one clicks with students. Here are some resources for feedback. So Checking for Understanding, Informative Assessment Techniques for Your Classroom by Fisher and Frey. Transforming Classroom Grading by Marzano. Classroom Assessment and Grading, that work by Marzano. How to Assess Higher Order Thinking Skills in Your Classroom by Bookhart. Grading Exceptional and Struggling Students by GUSKEY. And On Your Mark, Challenging the Conventions of Grading and Reporting by GUSKEY. So in this last period, I'm just going to talk about how you could apply this to geometry. Here's the sample gradebook. And nowadays, this is so much easier with Google Forms. You could just upload them into your gradebook, and it's pretty fast to do standards-based grading, where it was very tedious before all this technology is at our fingertips. So the first thing you want to do before even the gradebook is maybe course categories. So here I have a mix of course categories. Some of the old ones like homework, exams, participation, and projects. And if I want to make this more standards-based, you see me including volume, composite volume, solids of revolution, density, parallel lines cut by a transversal. Very specific topics. I could put the standard in there also, right? But instead of writing something like SDIC 6 for myself, I want students to have that transparency. I want them to use that and shift the dialogue between me and them about talking about standards. I want to hear them say, I need help with composite volume. You'll see my weights for each are about 5 points, right? Maybe that's not accurate in terms of their Regents exam, but it's accurate in terms of the marking period with respect to the weights. So each of these topics would be worth give or take 5%. Volume on a Regents exam is worth much more, but you'll see I want to break it down even more. I don't want to just have volume. I'd have volume, composite volume, and density, so I could really address where a student might be having a learning gap. And it's transparent to them, and it's evident to me in my gradebook. I don't have to wait till a monthly assessment to look at the data. I have the data on hand, and I have interventions I could do weekly. Don't have to wait until the end of the month. And here's a sample of me entering it, right? I might be doing multiple choice questions where it's either 2 points or 0 points, just like on a state exam. Open-ended questions can have partial credit, so 0, 1, or 2. I see here for the volume questions, right, we have either a grade of 1 or 2. That might have been an open-ended question. You'll see the first attempt and the second attempt, the lowest grade gets dropped. You'll also notice I don't have second attempts for density, cross-sections, and parallel lines cut by a transversal. And this is because I've actually taught this in prior semesters. So now it looks like it's a first attempt, but it's really a fourth and fifth attempt, and I'm testing for retention as well, right? And that's another thing with standards-based grading. If we're looking at the curriculum as a whole, we do not want to not take into record all the standards that the students have mastered, right? And retention is a great thing to test every now and then. So you'll see, I think cross-sections is a topic that I have not, I'm reteaching here or testing for retention, and so is parallel lines cut by a transversal. But density will have a second quiz, and the lowest grade will be dropped. And students, like anybody else in life, if you give them 2 attempts, their grades do improve, and that really changes the dialogue between you and them, and that changes their outlook in your class. In my personal experience in remote learning and in in-person learning, you start reaching students that you might feel like you've never reached before. And the transparency is huge. Using your gradebook is huge, because some of these gradebooks are directly linked with their parents, and their parents are seeing it visually. And now if they're improving and their parents see they're improving, it improves their dialogue with their parents about school, and they bring that energy to your class, and it just makes everything really attainable. So if they're not doing well on a subject, they know it's only weighted appropriately, so it might only be 2 or 3% of their grade. It's not the end of the world. And they know they're getting a second attempt. So I strongly suggest standards-based grading. I think it's a very effective tool, and I hope you guys got something from this presentation.